Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cyber Voices, the official podcast of the Australian Information Security Association, otherwise known as AISA. I'm your host, as always, David Willett, and it is my pleasure to have you with us as we explore the diverse voices of the Australian cyber industry. Welcome back to Cyber Voices, coming to you live again from CyberCon Melbourne 2025. I'm very, very fortunate to be joined in the booth this afternoon on day one by Michael Puckridge and Jamie Lindsay from DTEX. Gentlemen, how are you going?
Good. Very well so far, very well.
Very well.
Enjoying the day.
Enjoying the day, yeah. So it's day one. I think we're recording this at almost about 20 to 2. So lunch has just happened. Has it been a bit of a whirlwind so far?
I'd say so, yes. I mean, a fantastic morning, great opening, and then straight into a speaking slot, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment, and then get to come and explore the show floor, which is busy and buzzing, so it's great.
Yeah, really great to see Lieutenant Colonel Michelle McGuinness this morning too. That was fantastic.
Yeah, she's fabulous, isn't she? She's always got something new and interesting to add into the mix, and always something quite inspiring as well. So you said you've just come in from actually giving your talk. Standing room only, I hear. Congratulations.
It was a busy room. It was nice.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it obviously means you had something to say that resonated with people. I've got your title here in front of me for your talk. So exposing DPRK, nation-state threat actors. So we're talking about how North Korea's cyber threat operates more like an international criminal network than a traditional state-sponsored group. So your talk was all about discovering the surprising motivations and intricate operations behind DPRK's covert cyber workforce. Tell me a little bit more about the speech.
It's a space that we've been working on for a couple of years now, where we've had investigations that have led to the identification of North Korean workers, starting off in US organizations, but kind of hot off the press. We had our first one here in Australia last week, obviously timely from a conference perspective, but not great from a risk perspective. And really what we're seeing is this really interesting situation where, as a kind of unintended consequence of the sanctions on the regime in North Korea, they're finding other ways to make money, and they're finding other ways to fund their programs, including their programs for mass destruction and, all of those pieces. And so what we find is they're educating and bringing people through the ranks who are capable of performing IT work for enterprise-grade organizations. They're finding very clever ways of working through identification checks and getting themselves jobs, and then they're doing a job fairly well, but taking a paycheck back into the regime and kind of breach of sanctions. So it's an interesting space, and one of those that kind of draws a line really quickly in between what is fraud, what is a nation state action, and what is something that is a threat to both our national security and national security of other countries.
Yeah. Now remind me, you're referring to this whole thing that's been happening where North Korean actors have been basically deep faking their way into genuine positions within US and now Australian organizations. That is mind-blowing, by the way. Can I just say?
And certainly fed by our remote work, sort of nature of things now, that people were desperate for good ICT workers in short supply and often dropping their standards in recruiting and hiring processes and getting them on board. And, they appear to be doing a good job, but it's all that associated risk that then comes into the organization as well.
So standards dropped that low in recruitment during COVID.
Yes, but they're also very good.
Yeah.
So,
of course.
The thing here that makes it really hard is that the people who are applying know the tech. They have a good CV. They have a good resume. They have incredible capacity to fake credentials and fake identification. And they're passing really reputable ID checks. So we're not talking about the sort of thing where standards are so low that it's that people are just slipping through the cracks constantly. It's really their standard is high. What's probably gone on that's driven it the most is that in-person recruiting became impossible in COVID. And for the most part, we found ways to do it now post-COVID without in-person. And that's just creating the opportunity for that remote hiring still to be going on without necessarily considering this type of threat. And as a ingenuitive regime who are subject to these kind of things will do, they just find a way through.
Yeah. And so what is motivating this? Why, outside of, foreign interference and influence or whatever it might be, like what kind of organizations have they been infiltrating and why?
So a lot of it, financial is a major part of it, that, you've got a regime that needs to fund its activities, and this is one easy way of, or not so easy, but a way of bringing funds into the country.
Yeah, and what we're also seeing is that they're then specifically targeting, so financial services is where they started with the scheme, moved really quickly into software development companies, big consulting firms, IT kind of work, which is all about targeting through the supply chain to get to enterprise. The lines that we've been able to draw really closely here is a target towards companies who are innovating in AI. So they are effectively creating this closed loop where they are targeting companies who are using AI, taking their IP around the way that they're using AI, and then incorporating that into their job roles that they're looking to seek to gain employment over. So they're doing things beyond IT work now. They're doing things like engineering and CAD drawings and those types of things. And that's all been driven from the knowledge that they've been able to steal from the victims along the way. And then, unfortunately, the downside of it also becomes where one is caught, one is pinned. They'll kind of hand over between what are the traditional IT workers into the folks who are more cyber competent, who will then conduct the more traditional cyber attack or ransomware, encrypt files and hold them to ransom from that point. So most of it absolutely financially motivated. There's definitely an element of kind of economic growth that thit's looking for, and that the scale of this. I mean, there's reports that the universities that they're training students on, they're training up to 30,000 students a year in this type of work. So it's a much larger scale than I think what people realize. And then what you're seeing is that financial motivation quickly turns where they find access to something in an organization with that privileged access that's interesting to them, where they're then taking that on.
And also, part of the motivation is stealing, as Jamie alluded to, AI and things like that you've got very public programs from the president himself talking about their AI autonomous drones program, and this kind of stealing of research in those areas too is aiding the program as well.
And they're clearly not getting into entry-level roles to be able to steal this level of information. Or did you kind of say that they may sort of start somewhere and then take that and then reapply somewhere else?
They don't mind as long as they're well enough paying. So yeah, it typically wouldn't be your pure entry-level role because the revenue's not enough, right? It is a revenue generation activity. The ones that are most common would be your kind of like software development, front-end developers, AI engineers, those types of competencies where there's really good pay involved. So they're looking for that $200,000 a year paycheck. They're not looking for the 40 grand entry level. So they are looking at more skilled roles and looking at roles that are typically remote. So where an organization is happy to have them remote, that's where they'll be targeted.
So they train and educate in North Korea in universities there to be able to do these kind of positions and roles, but also specifically trained to be able to infiltrate organizations to do these roles. And then they're either bringing in IP that they can then reuse, or they're bringing in funds that go back to the state, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And, the estimates are something along the lines of 10 to 20% of the funds will go to the worker. The rest will go back to the regime. The conditions that they're operating in, we have, photographs of the conditions that we can share. They're awful. They're working in, almost in slavery circumstances effectively here. The network is also broad. So the IT worker themselves is one part of the puzzle. They'll typically be program managers and project managers that sit over top. They've almost gamified this. So they have leaderboards and stack rankings between the different groups, and they're playing the game between each other to see who can bring in the most revenue for the great regime. And then you also have facilitators in country. So they'll recruit either unwitting and unknowing participants to gain access to the physical endpoints to remote access in and do the work. Some of them, we believe, probably are more in on what's going on and are using it for their own personal financial gain. There's certainly been a series of indictments out of the FBI in the US that have outlined, where they've been successful in prosecuting individuals for that bit of work. We also have seen now laptops shipped to Australian addresses. So we're very confident that there are facilitators who have been recruited here as well now. But we're lucky in that we can learn from the mistakes that have gone before and kind of the scale of this in the US, where we feel like in Australia, we've got the opportunity to be ahead of the game and to stop this before it gets as widespread, and hopefully make it hard enough for them to do business here that they, look elsewhere.
And really recommend to anyone reading some of the FBI indictments as well, particularly the Chapman case, where, it's just amazing how she became embroiled in this program, was running a laptop farm out of her garage and had about 300 companies that were the endpoints that were being worked on as well. So
yeah, and this is you're just kind of circling on something that I'm thinking about here, just in terms of how that access is working and how they're not being identified as working out of North Korea. They're either remote accessing into somewhere in country, or you mentioned then, Jamie, that there is agents potentially within these organizations as well who are working for the North Korean regime. Is that correct?
Yeah, whether they know it or not. So there's certainly facilitators that are enabling this in country. And so what's typically happening is that a person will be sitting for an interview and will be getting a job, and then they'll be saying, cool, well, I'm not at my normal address, ship my laptop here. And that's when it goes into one of those facilitators. There's front companies that have been set up. So there's entire companies that have been taken down over this. There's some in Phoenix, for example, there's some in Minnesota, where there's a large amount of organization involved, again, because of the scale. So, and that's where you've got your in-country element coming into play.
Yeah, it's insane. It's mind-blowing stuff. I can see why you had such a crowd in the talk. When did people start to realize that this was going on? What was the first spark that, this is becoming a little bit of a true crime podcast almost, but what was the first spark that sort of led someone to believe, whether it was the FBI or whoever it was, that, hang on, something's not quite right here?
Yeah, so it's actually about 3 years ago, we believe, is probably the genesis of this. Our first involvement in this came from, we have a series of detections in our platform, in particular around folks who have multiple jobs and where that's a conflict of interest. So we're not necessarily interested in, a side hobby or a side hustle of some description, but where somebody is using their own gainful employment to leverage advantage outside of their workplace. And so the first one of these that we had was actually that situation originally. So what we detected was somebody who looked like they were working for multiple companies, taking multiple paychecks, doing a similar role, and was likely sharing information in between those two companies to perform that role, which was against a whole bunch of rules within the organizations. What we found as we started to conduct an investigation and started to dig deeper is that it was this, and it was a lot more insidious than what we thought initially. And that came through a series of investigations around what data was available to us in the organization, looking at open source information. And so in this case, there was a facilitator who is a very avid poster on social media, who is traveling all around the world, living his best life, windsurfing in various countries, and doing all kinds of interesting things. And we very quickly tracked down what he was doing. And then in amongst the investigation became very clear of where the origin of this was. That was reported pretty early into the FBI. And so our engagement with the FBI started around that point in time. They'd been tracking it for longer. They'd been watching it really closely. And I guess for everyone, it's been a bit of a case of not realizing exactly how deep or how big this was until probably 12 months, 18 months into it. And then now there's entire teams within field offices in the FBI focused on this threat and doing a fantastic job at shutting them down. So it's one of those, absolutely, it's a very interesting sequence of events that leads us to the point we are today and the understanding we have today of it.
And what, as you've dived into this, I mean, you've already mentioned a few things that were pretty mind-blowing. What's something that you have found as you've dived through this whole operation that has really, really shocked you or surprised you in terms of how it's pulled off?
Yeah, it's the use of tools and the way we're picking up and identifying things. They're trying to use tools and systems that are already in play, but often using access of one company to leapfrog into others. So that's sort of certainly been an interesting finding. For me, it's been certainly things like understanding that some of the things that they're going in and collecting, particularly about AI, is going directly into an autonomous drone program and things like that. I think for me that they're some of the more shocking points of what we've seen in some of these things.
Yeah, for me, it's the scale and the organization. So, I mean, it's one thing to have caught one or two of these things and go, okay, to give you a stat, it's about somewhere between 12 and 15% of our customer base in the US have had workers on staff, which is an enormous number for us. We thought this was going to be quite isolated until we started digging further, until everyone started talking about it. The other thing that the good guys aren't very good at is collaborating. Not a lot of people want to admit that they've had one of these in the organization. Give a lot of credit to Know Before, who were one of the very public ones who first admitted that they'd hired one and put this out in the market. We've had one go through an interview process, for example, in our organization. But just the sheer scale and just how brazen they are. There's a really interesting investigative journalist piece that's available on YouTube that basically the author there, his name's Christopher, he decided he wanted to interview one for real live, and he was working with our team on how to kind of facilitate that. And the advice to him was put up a job posting and within 10 minutes you have one on the hook, and he didn't believe us, and he did. So just how brazen they are, how organized they are. And that, like I mentioned before, the gamification of it. So the way in which that they're getting various teams to compete with each other to see who can raise the most money, it's almost like a Wolf of Wall Street type of kind of environment where like who can be the best one, but it's obviously for a very different purpose. And to me, it's just staggering that they've managed to get it to this scale before, it's been cottoned on to what's going on, and then how quick they're adapting to the tactics now. So when FBI release an indictment, they include kind of how they caught them, which is great, but it means that they adapt really quickly to the next set of tactics. Same thing with location. So they're finding it harder and harder to do business in the US. Guess what? They start to turn up in our country. So that ability to adapt and to scale and to organize is really staggering to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, the FBI can issue an indictment, but where's the consequence for them anyway, apart from just having to adapt and try again, right?
No, and it's the facilitators right now who are in country who are facing those consequences and getting sentenced to jail terms and things like that. But yeah, the regime itself, I mean, they just move on to the next target. It's such low risk, high reward for them in the end.
When will people profiting off illegal activities learn to stop bragging about it on Instagram?
That's the other
not another Lamborghini.
I know. I feel like that is like every Netflix documentary I've seen recently where someone's gotten busted because they just couldn't help themselves and doing exactly that. Yeah. No, that's crazy. Just to think that. Well, it sounds like COVID and remote working was a big driver behind this, but the other thing that has really launched this, which is everyone's favorite topic at CyberCon for the last 2 years, is AI. So how big has AI been in just being able to help this flourish and thrive?
Well, they use it. So they use AI as effectively as we do, and we have to remember that. We have interview recordings and screen grabs of them using ChatGPT or Claude or one of the models, not to name, there's not them that are enabling it on purpose, where they're being asked an interview question and they're quickly typing it into ChatGPT to respond with a really high-grade answer, similar to what we're seeing, for folks who use it, in our country. But their ability to leverage and use AI technologies to help them to deliver, they're using AI technologies to do the job and doing it really effectively, just as effectively as we are, and they're learning with us as we're growing it. But that ability that they have because of their levels of coordination to take that information that they're gleaning from the use of AI in individual roles of what a company knows about AI and collate that, collaborate between each other and really provide an uplift in the use of AI is something I think we need to learn from. They're doing it really well and using the technology really efficiently.
And the use of it for even their profiles on LinkedIn and, developing the images on there and their personas.
Yeah. I mean, one of the advices in an interview you see is, get them to put their hand over their face because it breaks the AI kind of filter, the deep fake filter. And they're going through, and it's hilarious. It's like a pantomime where they'll sit there and they'll put their hand beside their head, not right in front of their head, so that it doesn't break. Because they know as soon as they put their hand in front of the face, they're caught. But they're using all of those technologies. They're using translation technologies. They're using all of the wonderful kind of things that we think of from AI from a positive. They're also leveraging really effectively.
Yeah, and they probably see it as a positive.
Oh, 100%.
I was wondering how you get someone to wave their hand in front of their face during an interview. Is that a fly?
Exactly.
You need to swat that.
Jamie also has some interesting questions that he suggests asking.
Oh, my favorite ones. I'll start with the easy ones where, like, at the end of the day, the person that you're interviewing likely isn't in the location they say they are. So you just ask the conjovial kind of interview question. Oh, what's your favorite baseball team? Or what's your favorite cricket team? What's your favorite footy team? They'll have no idea. They just don't even know, like, how to answer those questions. Or what's your favorite local restaurant? And they'll come up with something really generic. You go, oh, surely there's something more local than that, and kind of pressing them. Probably the most hilarious one is getting them to say that Kim Jong-un is fat because they're not allowed to say that. And they'll end the interview very quickly over that question.
Interesting. I still can't imagine asking someone to do that in an interview. That's funny. I'm actually thinking back to an experience that I had not too long ago. I wasn't on this interview, but someone on my team said that they were interviewing a security analyst, and they said it was very, very clear that the person they were interviewing was using AI to answer the questions. And now they called this person out on the interview, and they had all kinds of excuses as to why they did. But now I'm like going back in my mind, I'm like, oh, what was this one?
And this is the thing here, right? A bunch of these indicators and a bunch of the ways in which we catch these folks, it's not 100%, right? So you're not going to be able to say, hey, yeah, that person was definitely a participant in this scheme.
Yeah.
We're seeing organized crime also mimic these methods and use these methods. They don't have necessarily the scale of education behind them, but they're still mimicking these methods. So you just don't know whether it's that. You don't know whether it could have been somebody who, just was blagging their way through an interview and just didn't really have the skills they said they have. But there's absolutely a possibility, and that's where helping people to understand that when you see those things, to report them into our authorities so they can investigate and they can look. And one of the things that's been most helpful is that information sharing and that knowledge sharing around this space. And there's a fantastic community that share this information, which is where we get a bunch from, where we confirm a lot of our suspicions from, is we make sure that anything we publish has been double verified before we publish it in this space, including email addresses and identities of folks who've participated in the scheme. And it's from that knowledge sharing of people's experiences where that happens. So I just strongly encourage that if anyone listening here has a scenario like, oh, wait, yeah, that might have been this, report it. And because that just uplifts everyone's ability to react and protect ourselves from this.
And I think, here we are at a cyber conference, but, often it's not the cyber tools and IT tools that are going to draw these things out. It's actually the interview process. And I know when one of them got through to an interview with us, and it was some of the answers around impossible IT things that hadn't been invented when they were claiming that they'd worked on certain tools, and even picking up things like they claiming to be at home, but in the gap between the background image, you could see a call center behind them as well. So it's just having that vigilance in some of those processes, and also trying to make sure HR, wherever possible, actually doing interviews in person.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. Do we need to go back to enforcing like strict in-person interviews? Because I got my current job only last year without setting foot in the organization once. In fact, I was on holidays and did my final interview from a hotel in Barcelona. Because
are you sure you're not an AI?
Yeah. I just kept doing this, waving my hand in front of my face. Yeah, but I mean, it's not always possible because there's still a lot of organizations out there that have pivoted and still leaning heavily on hybrid and work from anywhere, depending on how much they downsize their physical footprint during that time.
And what we just suggest is where you can have one interview in person, have somebody in the company meet them. We started this a while ago before even this threat, as much from a cultural fit perspective as anything. So we still do the vast majority. We're a very remote workforce in the organization we work for. And so most interviews will be remote, but we've added a step where there's at least one physical interview wherever possible. It might not be possible in a super remote location, but where possible, we'll do one. That helps. Saying that you're going to do it helps. It does act as a protective factor. They're less likely to apply for the job in the first place. So that does help, but not foolproof, but absolutely where you can doing it. The other aspect on the recruitment and the HR side that we kind of draw attention to is, cyber professionals and we work specifically in the insider risk space. So insider risk teams often struggle to get quality engagement with HR in the way that they're operating. And this is just such a fantastic example of the way in which cross-domain function works within an enterprise. And so the ability as a cyber professional or as an insider risk professional to walk to HR and say, hey, I've got something that you just need to know about and let me help you so that we protect ourselves from this threat, just helps to bridge that gap between the organizations, which is really vital towards the way that we kind of empower our culture around, the human firewall, which Michelle was talking about this morning, is engaged. This is a great engagement factor for HR to be able to bring them to the table as well.
Given what we've found in Australia recently and how big of an issue this was in the US until sort of the crackdown began, how alarmed or alert should Australian organizations be right now?
We're never one to over-egg something. So this isn't the panic stations run around.
Sure.
It's not that for sure. But it is real. The threat is real. So it's about understanding the depth of it. It's about understanding that if you do end up hiring somebody in this space and you do end up sending money to that individual, you are in breach of sanctions. There are potentially large consequences towards that if you're found to have done that negligently. Mm-hmm. There are real and significant risks to the organization around your data, around your systems, and the way that they operate. So it's something to be aware of. Is this something that we'd expect every organization around here is going to experience in the next 12 months? Probably not. Absolutely not. But there's just really, really easy things that you can do right now that don't cost a lot of money just to protect yourself from this and to just make the fight too hard for them so that they move on.
Yeah.
And I think there's also an element here of making sure your supply chain is aware of this as an issue too, because you're often getting ICT services from a third party and, making sure that they're aware and looking for these things.
Oh, yeah. I'm going back and having all kinds of conversations with my talent team after doing this interview with you both. I wonder how much in is there a new kind of paradigm of like education and awareness that needs to come in? Because I feel like remote interviewing is not going away because it's just so damn convenient.
Yeah. Oh, for
right?
sure.
Like,
It's not going away.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I work on the other side of town and I'll just go, yeah, cool. I'll just do a Zoom because it's much, much easier and I don't have to coordinate. I don't have to book a room, all that kind of stuff.
There's still things that you can do in the interview, like we mentioned. And worst case scenario is having the right capabilities to detect in case somebody did come on board. So there are some really obvious mitigations and indicators around that. There's a bunch of public stuff from both a bunch of other cyber vendors. We have some stuff out there that's worth reviewing for teams and security teams out there to make sure that you're catching them as they come on board. Having the right kind of practice of reacting to it if it was to happen to you. So what do you do to protect yourself from the worst of the cyber threat here is really critical. So how do you make sure that you completely close off all access to systems and to data for those individuals if you do see it happen? So just being ready for what this is. And really to us, this is just an extension of how an insider risk program runs anyway and what an insider risk program should be doing. This just happens to be one of those specific threats that starts from the outside and works its way in, which is what we're seeing in a lot of cyber breaches that are going on. And so that ability to react and have the maturity around the way that you react if it happens is really important as well.
Yeah, and it also sounds like there's some of that early 2000s shame of being compromised, right? We're a little bit more open about a cyber incident these days, but I think, Michael, it was you were saying before that there's almost this hesitation to want to come out and admit publicly that we hired a North Korean agent, like, and I can imagine why, but I wonder if that unwillingness to speak up and that shame could also just be feeding, the success of it a little bit.
100%. And it's, for us, it's the sharing is what's going to stop this from getting any bigger than it is. That ability to say, yeah, it happened and this is what we saw. This is why, this is how. Because again, the tactics are just evolving so fast. Their ability to, like I mentioned around the identity forgery, for example, it started off, the first few that we saw were like pretty poor copies. And it's like, how did you not pick it up? The latest ones we're seeing are amazing forgeries. And so you got to understand that sometimes being outsmarted or outwitted is just part of this game. And it's okay to admit that. You're better off admitting it than letting it go through the keeper and just, be honest and share.
Absolutely. Well, Jamie and Michael, this has been a really, really great conversation. And thank you so much for bringing this interesting topic to CyberCon. I'm going to let you get out there and continue to enjoy the rest of the event. So thank you so much for sharing your voices with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cyber Voices. Our music is by Sanar Garut, our show artwork is by Studio Quarantine, and we record our show at This Is a Studio in Pran, Melbourne, part of Popplant Productions. Please make sure you follow the show on your podcast platform of choice and leave us a 5-star review. This will help others find the show. Also, please follow the association on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you want to add your voice to our ever-growing chorus of diverse cyber voices, have questions, feedback, or would like to be a sponsor, you can do so by emailing us at cybervoices@aisa.org.au. That's cybervoices@aisa.org.au. Are you an AISA member? If not, you should consider joining our network of over 12,000 members across Australia. An AISA membership can open doors, build professional networks, create lifetime friendships, and offer exclusive training, events, and other perks. Become a member today by heading to our website at aisa.org.au. That is all for today. I hope you will join us again next time on Cyber Voices.